They say perfection doesn't exist. However, there are some people that refuse to accept that fact, and there are those that will go too far to attain said perfection. Hi, I'm Paul Holstein, and I'm going to be reading to you the story of the Maestro on the season finale of Poltergeist Frights. They say there is no such thing as perfection. The people that say that are uncultured fools that have no imagination, living in their little world of mediocrity. I, on the other hand, am a visionary, a pioneer, and dare I say, a genius. I have strived for perfection, making it my life's ambition to create an absolutely flawless melody that would rival the great Beethoven himself. They all thought I was insane, but they claim that to all the brilliant minds in history. They have changed the fabric of our known reality, and my melodies are nothing short of that. Brilliant. They don't appreciate the fluidity of classical masterpieces these days, only listening to what I can only describe as a sin to the ears on our heads. I knew I had to save these poor souls from this unforsaken fate. I will be the conductor that will also be their savior. That is why I opened a facility to bring young minds under my wing, to save them from the unmelodious hell of modern music. After years of teaching young minds, one young man has come along that will make my grand orchestra complete. I said before that they thought I was crazy, but they also knew that I can turn a musician with the roughest edges into a sparkling diamond that will make their music fly and shine for the world to see. One day, I was getting out of my orchestra's room when I saw an unfamiliar face walk in the facility. He was a handsome young man, looked to be 16 years of age, wearing ungodly rags that society decided to pass as clothes these days. He was holding a violin case, and despite the look of its owner, it seemed to have been polished and respected by him. I could see his passion through his eyes, a sign of arrogance, but also of promise. He'd introduced himself as Johannes, and asked to be taught how to perfect his way with the angelic strings, and I very gladly accepted to do so. He attempted to make his way to the room where my orchestra resides, but I swiftly stopped him. I explained to him that he has to earn the honor of playing with my orchestra, and led him upstairs to the training area for my new students. I slightly open the door and told him to keep practicing while I led young Johannes into his room. The room we entered was barren, except for 2 chairs for me and Johannes, as well as some speakers on the wall and a dagger hanging on the picture frame with Memento Mori engraved on the steel. He looked uneasy seeing the blade, but I reassured him that it was a gift from a dear friend of mine. I told him to take a seat and get his violin ready to play a special melody. He did what he was told, a good sign, and got his instrument and bow into position. I brought out sheet music with my 8th Symphony and gave it to him, and I got my baton ready to instruct him. I stood from my chair and gestured to him to begin, my baton flowing into the air like a majestic bird as his music raises its wings. His eyes were entranced by my baton and obeyed its commands. He was like a puppet, and I was the puppeteer. Each note and melody he played was magical, hypnotic, almost tear-jerking. However, there was one important thing that young Johannes' performance was not. Perfect. I stopped him in the middle of the offensive noise that my ears had the dishonor of hearing. I asked him if he could even hear the imperfections of his music, and he had the gall to say that he thought it was pretty good. While I don't disagree with his statement that he was pretty good, if that is what satisfies him, I'm afraid he's doomed like the rest of the world. He must strive for flawlessness, pristineness, and absolute perfection. I took the violin from his hands, getting it away from his reach to prevent him from getting it returned to his person. If he wants it back, he's going to have to promise to attain the same ambition towards prestige that I have taught all of my students, which is what I explained to young Johannes. The passion in his eyes started to fade, like he's becoming a true puppet. He agreed to do better, so I returned his previously abused instrument to him, telling him that we continue to see what progress. The next day, Johannes came back, dark circles visible underneath with bandages covering his fingers, the true sign of dedication. I again told the orchestra to keep practicing and went back to the room. As we sat on our respective chairs, Johannes was already getting his sheet music and violin ready for the performance. I took out my baton and raised it to gesture him to begin. He played the melody again, but this time it was different. The music flowed more gracefully, the crescendo flying around the room like a flock of majestic birds, his arms moving on their own like they were the only conscious thing on his body. He was proven that he has been practicing and practicing, chasing that ever-eluding perfection the whole way. However, right when I started to believe that he had achieved what so few have strived to be, he hit that last note to finish the masterpiece. And it was a millisecond of the tempo. I just stared at him as soon as he finished, looking into his eyes to see pride in his work, an awfully offensive look after giving me such a display. I stared at him a bit longer before I slowly got up from my chair and suddenly found myself throwing it against the wall in anger, splinters flying through the air across the room. I ran over to him, my face a colorful red. Young Johannes got up from his chair and tried to keep his distance from me, as I took his chair and threw it as well, this time towards the wall he had his back against, barely missing him. Before I knew it, I had my hands around his throat, his begging and choking echoing throughout the room. He made me do this. He was so close to being the perfect musician, only to fail miserably to make me look like a fool. I started berating him while he struggled, telling him that this was his insubordination. Johannes pushes me away, running towards the dagger on the frame. Young Johannes broke the glass to collect the weapon, his hands dripping blood from the flying shards. He points the blade at me, his hands shaking, but his eyes determined to attack his supposed oppressor. I slowly backed away until my back was against the wall, making him think that he had me in a corner. He slowly walked closer and closer until I took out my baton, raising it as if directing a grand orchestra. As soon as I made the first movement, the speakers blared Beethoven's 8th Symphony. Johannes immediately collapsed on the floor, ever so desperately covering his ears. Every great composer must know that you shouldn't rely on their ears to listen to the music, as the great Beethoven himself has taught us. The F sharp was cutting into the ears of Johannes, blood dripping out of his sensitive little ears. He needed to learn the importance of achieving perfection, so I turned the volume to its highest level, activated a special sound of my own, and left Johannes with his new teacher, taking the dagger in the process, as I waited until the next day to check on him. The next glorious day, I entered the room holding young Johannes. When I saw him, his ears were caked with his blood. His eyes were even redder, losing that passion he had upon entering. His mouth was agape, with a stream of saliva flowing like a grand harmony. He finally looked like a musician that strives for perfection. I decided that he was ready to complete my grand orchestra, so I picked him up on his feet and led him to the room. We entered the room, revealing the same blood-caked, red-eyed students between the ripe ages of 12 and 16. They didn't stop practicing even when we entered, the strings' fingers bleeding, the lips of the brass and woodwinds non-existent. You can't be perfect if you don't make your goal the only thing you live for, as you could risk the threatening mediocrity. Upon entering the room, young Johannes went to the only empty chair and sat down, ready to join in on the greatest honor that everyone else will soon experience. Every good conductor must treat their orchestra like puppets, and their baton is the string that moves them. I tapped my string on the podium to signal my orchestra to get ready to play a beautifully special song. I raised the baton, and the orchestra began the melody. Upon the first note being played, a tear was already coming out of my eye, as the harmony was sublime, mystical, perfect. From the crescendo to the fortes, I couldn't be happier to gain what I have strived to attain throughout my journey, the perfect orchestra. When we neared the grand finale, the speakers turned on to echo the flawless music throughout the entire building to truly appreciate this accomplishment. I took out the dagger to assist my baton in the directing of the final notes before I raised it, aiming for myself. At last, I have conducted the perfect Ninth Symphony. And that has been the Maestro. But that has also been the last story of the season. For those of you that have listened to these stories over the past 5 days, I want to thank you. And I hope you stay tuned for November 1st, because that will be when I'll be posting the first poll of Season 3. And I will be writing and posting the first story of Season 3 in December. And with that, for one last time, at least for now, I'm Paul Holstein, and this has been Poltergeist Frights.